Hi friends, this is Tina and welcome to my new video. Today's video is of course all about my June theme in my bullet journal. And I'm really excited to show that to you because I think this is actually one of my all-time favorite themes and at least my favorite in this notebook. And by the way, this is going to be the last theme in this bullet journal because next month we are going to be starting a new one. I'm going to be posting, of course, my new bullet journal setup later in June, and I'm really excited to show you what I can come up with for my new Mellow Days journal. So here's a little painting sketch that I made of this month's theme, and I really wanted to make strawberries, so I was happy to, include them for the first time in a bullet journal theme. I feel like that's such a usual theme that people always go for at some point in their bullet journaling journey, but I've never painted strawberries in my bullet journal before, so it was a good option and I really loved making them. So I'm going to be using my Van Gogh watercolors that were gifted to me by Royal Talents today. I always go for them when I'm using watercolor and I think it's a good set of colors. I just mixed here some kind of olive green shades and also the red for the strawberries before we start, and then I started to paint the strawberries that I had sketched in my pages. So yeah, I did a really good sketch beforehand. As you can see, it's quite dark even, but I have never noticed any issue with like painting over sketches with watercolors. I don't, first of all, really mind if there's some pencil marks showing through, but I don't think you can also even really see that when you're done with the painting, at least in this case. So yeah, I wanted to paint some wild strawberries and I started by painting the strawberries itself first. So with all of my strawberries, I basically first just went with a orangey yellow layer of color onto the bottom and on the top of the strawberry, and then I painted on top with red. And I tried to make sure that the red was really nice and vibrant, but I am also going to be darkening that shade much more when we go forward, when I kind of see how the first layer dries and I can build the colors on top of that. And I tried to imagine that with all of my paintings, the light was coming from the left side. So the left side of the strawberry is much lighter and it has that kind of highlighted spot in it. And then the right side is going to be much darker, and I'm adding much more black into my red color to make that dark shadow onto that side. And I think that was a good idea. I pretty much made all of the strawberries in the same exact way, whether they were small or big or they were different shapes. I did the same steps with all of my strawberries. So I went with this illustration style that was kind of massive in a way. I don't know how to explain this, but it's kind of like there's a branch coming on top of this whole page, and they're growing from the bottom to up, and the strawberries are kind of like hanging from the branch that we're making. And I think that made it look very interesting and also very illustrative in a way. I don't know how to explain this, but of course this is not the most realistic strawberry plant that I'm making here, but I just wanted that kind of effect in this page where the branch was coming from the bottom and just kind of hanging on top of my calendar that I'm making on the opposite page when I'm done with the painting itself. It's also fun because I realized while I was painting this that my theme for this June is very similar color-wise to my last June theme. So if you haven't seen that video where I set up my June theme for 2022, I painted some red cottages and I also had a lot of greens in that theme, and I also used this like light yellow paper. So this definitely gave me fun flashbacks of last year's theme, but I definitely think that this is much better and I enjoy this even more. So as you can see, I pretty much left that orangey yellow kind of showing through in the bottom of the strawberries. I think that gave a nice little pop of color to them and made them look more interesting. And I was really working on the strawberries and just like perfecting them. I didn't want to make them, or I didn't try to make them like super realistic, but of course I tried to make them, as nice looking as possible. And as you can see, we had a little skip there. I actually had a corrupted file, so you can see how I made the flowers and the leaf caps on the strawberries, but I will make them in all of my other pages as well, so don't worry. And I'm starting to make the leaves now. I have to say that that was definitely the part of the process that I actually disliked the most. I didn't necessarily dislike it, but since there is quite a lot of leaves and they're not as fun to paint as the strawberries, and they take a lot more color building and layering and just like letting things dry and going over them again and again. So that was definitely a part that was a little bit frustrating to me, but I still got through it. But it was definitely the most time-consuming part of this whole painting process, and that's also why I'm kind of speeding it up here. I can explain how I do it, but I didn't want to have too big of a chunk of this whole painting process be just the leaves. So with all of the leaves, I tried to kind of think which side of the leaf would be more in shadow, and to that side I of course added darker colors. I pretty much first just went with a darker base color for the whole side of the leaf and left the other one with only that base color that is much lighter. And then I started adding the veins, and of course I made them also darker on the darker side and then lighter on the other side. I feel like my initial painting sketch that I made before this actually turned out a lot better, and I didn't really necessarily get them to look the way that I wanted, but it's okay. I think in the end my leaves were a little bit weird in contrast. I think they should have been a little bit darker on the darker side sometimes and also have a little bit more color on the lighter side, but you know, what can you do? I think it still turned out really good in the end. So yeah, I'm really just speeding up this process and just cutting some things out because I'm really just repeating what I'm doing all over again. I also had matching snacks. So yeah, I went with strawberries because of course this month is going to be June and it's a summer month, and strawberries always remind me of summer. This is also fun because we last year we moved into a new place and we got a balcony, so I just recently bought a strawberry plant in our balcony, and just having some plants and veggies and fruits growing in our balcony has made me feel really good and excited for the summer. And I actually had a first strawberry there when I bought it, and I already ate it, and it just makes me really happy. So I think that was also the reason why I went with strawberries. But I actually just recently got a strawberry tattoo as well, so I think that this was a perfect thing to tie all of those things together. And yeah, of course, strawberries are the perfect thing for summer anyway, and I've always eaten a lot of them during the summer. I remember when I was a kid and I feel like I ate liters of strawberries every day pretty much, and now I'm kind of okay, I don't need to eat so many of them anymore. I mainly just put them in my porridge or something, but yeah, it's a fun summer memory for sure. I also added the same kind of darker details on the leaf caps of the strawberries and just added that darker shade on the bottom of the leaves. And then I also made the stem to all of the strawberries and the leaves. I think this is definitely the part that kind of made this painting really nice because I love the rounded shapes of the stems. They just make this look really whimsical and fun in my opinion, so I really liked that. Now I'm doing one of the last details in this painting. So I think that the highlights in the strawberries looked a little bit unrealistic because the white area was so big. So I ended up making those dots inside of that highlight a little bit bigger, like the red areas inside of that, just so that the white highlights would kind of just go around those red areas, if that makes any sense. And then I also added a couple of elements to the strawberries with gouache too. Firstly, I took my watercolor though, and I made those darker seeds on the bottom of the strawberries, and then I took my white gouache and just added a couple of little highlights onto the right sides of the strawberry, some little ones. I don't think this made much of a difference, but I did it anyway. And then I also mixed in a lot of yellow to that white, so I made these light yellow seeds on top of those red dots on the left side on top of those highlighted areas. I don't know if this makes any sense. I feel like I'm really bad at explaining, but basically I just painted a little dot for the seeds on the right side as well. And although that was a really small detail, I actually think that that made this painting look much more realistic and interesting. So I really loved doing that with all of my paintings. But now the painting process itself is done, but I have to give props to this notebook. I was using so much water with this painting that I had to sometimes just flip the page and just make sure that there wasn't any bleed through on the other side. But to my surprise, there never was, and the wrinkling also itself is very minimal. Like there is barely anything when you actually flip the page down. And if you want to get a notebook like I'm using here, if you use a lot of paints with your bullet journal like I do, you can purchase this Mellow Days notebook with my discount code TINA10 and get 10% off, and I also get a small commission if you do that. But I of course wanted to add the June header in this page somehow, so I ended up just making this big serif font onto the empty spot on the right side. I was using my Tombow fudenosuke hard tip pen, and I just made the letter J, and I made it in the serif font, but I left the kind of insides of those letters white, and I only drew the outline. So now we are working on my calendar page on the left page. So I started by gluing in this really light yellow piece of paper, and as you can see, I cut out those areas where I have the paintings so they would kind of be on top of that calendar. I accidentally made it a little bit too big, so I had to cut one dot space out, but it was fine. And then I made my calendar grid on top using my Pigma micron fine liner in size 01. And yeah, this is my basic style of making calendars, having a colorful paper underneath, and that gives a nice pop of color to the page without having to really do that much. Then I was using my Faber-castell brush pen to make the dots for the dates in the calendar, and I also wrote the dates on top with a fine liner. I did a lot of mistakes with this whole spread, and I added a little frame to the calendar, and I ended up just covering that up entirely. And I tried to also use different colors for the dots in the calendar, but I ended up going with these anyway. And I also did the days of the week on top of the calendar off camera because I was just struggling a lot. But I have to say that this is one of my favorite cover pages I've done in a while, and I absolutely loved setting it up, even though it took a while. But yeah, now we are getting into my trucker spread, and this is again one of those that I really like. I did struggle with this one. I think I had a big struggle with all of my spreads this time. I ended up kind of covering some elements in each of my spreads this month, so I guess I was a little bit indecisive, but I think everything turned out really good, so it's fine. So as you can see, I'm starting to work with another painting on this page. So we're currently painting on the right page, and the right page is for my playlist, and then the left one is for my trackers. I like to include my playlist nowadays with my habit tracker because I don't use a mood tracker anymore, and I just really like to add a playlist in my monthly setups because it's always nice to flip back and look at my previous themes and see what kind of music I listen to, so it's not all just super practical and all about planning and tracking. So yeah, I really like to always do my playlist spread. And I also love to make this illustration. I think it's super fun. I loved the kind of balance in this whole painting. I loved how they're hanging, those strawberries and the leaves are hanging from the corner, and they just look really fun. And yeah, I just love it. And I again tried to add some of those flowers in the spread as well. I tried to have a nice balance between some of the leaves and the strawberries and the leaf caps on the strawberries and then those flowers as well. I tried to make sure that some of the leaves were kind of behind the strawberries, but some were on top as well. And it also made it much easier to paint them when all of them were not, underneath some other elements, because it was kind of hard to add those shadows and make them look good when there was a lot of things on top of them, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I really loved painting throughout this whole theme, and it was a lot of fun to work with watercolors as well, because I oftentimes go for gouache. I think I've used watercolor in some of my previous themes now, but I usually always love to paint with gouache because it's something that I'm much more comfortable with. But having this style and actually being able to make something pretty realistic looking with watercolors was something that I have never really done before. So it was so much fun, and I think this was the perfect option for a painting medium, because I think with gouache I would have spent even more time on all of my paintings, and I probably would have obsessed over small details way too much. You know, sometimes when you paint with watercolors, you just have to live with what you have done. You cannot really infinitely just go over details and do things differently, because you cannot really layer that in the same way as you can do with gouache. So yeah, I think it was good that I was just able to paint it and just be done with it, even though it wasn't perfect. So I, wouldn't obsess over the details too much. Again, I will have my new bullet journal setup uploaded on YouTube at some point in June. So if you want to see that and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so. And also press the bell icon to be notified of my future videos. I'm really excited to post my new bullet journal setup here and, start working on it and start working with a new bullet journal. It feels weird that this one is already at its end, and this is the last pages that I will ever make in this bullet journal. And here you can see a little close-up of me adding those yellow dots into the strawberries itself. Again, that was the most satisfying part of the process. It was something that I didn't realize that I would need in a way. Like, the strawberries look good without them too, but it just makes them look so much better. So I'm really happy with that. But after I was done with the painting itself, I started to make my playlist, and it's the simplest there is, really. I just cut these rectangles out of the pale yellow paper that I used for my cover page as well, and they were kind of my album covers for each of my songs that I added. And then I also just wrote the songs after that, and later on I also made a little frame for the whole page, which I think turned out really pretty, but I'm only doing it later after I've done my tracker page as well. So next we are making my tracker page, and this is the simplest of them all, really. I was just using the same kind of technique. I made this brown graph paper background, and then I just glued that calendar grid on top, and then I just glued them onto the page. I did try to see if I could, have that yellow paper as a background for this page somehow, because it just looked so simple, but I still just ended up going with the simplest option because I think it just looked the best next to the more busy playlist page. I also ran out of my glue tape roller, so I ended up just using a glue stick, which isn't my favorite thing, but I guess it still got the job done. I tried to use the same pen that I used for my cover page to make those headers on top of my habit trackers, but it didn't really work. I didn't like the color on top of that white background, so I ended up just gluing some white paper on top and writing my headers on top of that. Then I also used my stamps to stamp the word trackers on top of this page. I love these stamps so much and I cannot not use them, so I ended up also making my header that way. That is it for my tracker spread. I actually really love it, and I think the illustration on the right corner turned just perfect. But now we are going to be setting up my content planner. So this spread right here is the exact same as I've used for a couple of months now. I just like the layout, so I don't know why I would change it in any way. So I'm first just adding that yellow paper and just making my calendar grid on top again. I like doing it this way. Again, it just makes the page look more interesting without really having to do much. And then I wrote the week numbers onto the left side and made a little section for my weekly planning. And I also ended up just covering the days of the week, the header that I made on top of the calendar, because I didn't like it. I actually ended up just stamping the header later on, but now we are going to go to the painting itself. I ended up adding a painting in the spread even though I wasn't sure if I was gonna do it because I don't necessarily need it in any way, but I just loved painting those strawberries a lot, so I ended up including it here. I also lost some footage here. My phone's storage just was suddenly full and I didn't notice, so I couldn't get you the footage of me painting the strawberry cut in half. But I mean, the process was surprisingly simple. It was much more simple than the actual strawberries itself, but yeah, I'm sad that I lost it. But anyway, I felt like with this painting, I was starting to get a little bit impatient. Even though I was happy with painting more strawberries, I was especially like not that inspired to paint the leaves anymore. I noticed that I started to get a little bit sloppy, and after I had already painted them quite a lot of times, I felt like I was just kind of starting to make them even more simple and even more messy. And when I didn't really have that patience, I also started to not make them as pretty as before. I felt like my shadows and highlights and things like that didn't really make that much sense anymore. But I mean, it's okay. I think the illustration and all of my paintings still turned out fine, but I definitely was kind of starting to lose the motivation to work on the leaves because I just felt like there were so many of them. But I mean, that's my fault for sketching so many of them in my pages, but yeah, I still enjoyed the painting process, but I just tried to make sure that it goes a little bit faster, I guess. But after I was done with the painting itself, I then just stamped the header for my calendar. I just used the first letter of the day, and I think that this made the page look a little bit better because I had already written the weekly numbers with that, like, I don't know, normal font with my pen, so it made it look a little bit more interesting. And then I used my really light colored brush pen and I just made those little lines for the weekly tasks so that, again, it would look like there's more going on. Then I used this craft paper and I glued it onto the edge of the page on the left side. I always love reusing things that I have around the house. So this craft paper here is actually an envelope that I got when I ordered something. I don't know what I ordered and what it came with, but yeah, I was just cutting that out and using it in this whole setup, and I think that was a great idea. I stamped the words content planning onto the top of this page, and then I used my red watercolor and made these little dots for the other section of this page. If you're wondering what this section of this page is, it's a very simple way of planning for my upcoming YouTube videos. So I have each of these dots where I can just add one video, and then I can add the date where I want that to be posted or would want that to be posted. And then I can just add all of my tasks and to-dos underneath that so I remember what I need to do in order to get the video done. This whole spread is very simple, but there's really no need to make it super complicated, at least in my opinion. But now that that spread is done, I'm actually going to be skipping my goals page, and I will do it later on my own. I just didn't feel like doing it in this video and I already have spent so much time on it. So I ended up just going straight to my weekly spread. So if you don't know how I'm normally doing my weeklies, I'm always making Dutch doors and cutting tabs. So my tabs are always 1 dot space wide, and the lower portion of the tab is 6 dots while the upper portion is 4, and then I'm cutting them diagonally. I don't know if that makes any sense why I'm saying that out loud, but I hope you can get that idea from this video. And then I'm cutting the tab on the next spread just underneath that one, so when the pages are on top of each other, you can see each of the tabs peeking out from the side, and you can just use them when you are flipping through the pages. I also did cut the lower portion of each Dutch door flap as well because the Dutch doors are horizontal, so I will have a space underneath all of the bunch of Dutch doors that you can see from each weekly, but then the upper portion of this whole spread is all of the weeks, so I can flip between them. I feel like it's really hard to explain this, but I guess it makes more sense when you just can see what I'm doing. And I also need to cut the lower portion really close to the center, so I always try to avoid the binding in the notebook so it doesn't completely like break. But yeah, I always love making Dutch door weeklies. It's so simple and so convenient. You don't really have to, make weeklies throughout the whole month. As you can see, I'm also making a painting on the left side of the spread, so I also ended up just sketching some more elements on this painting so you could see them, from every weekly. You will see that later as well. But then I'm also going to be gluing this yellow paper on the sides of each of those Dutch door flaps on the right side. I really loved how that looked in some of my recent themes, so I ended up doing it. It brings a nice color to my weeklies. First, I just made a rough cut, and afterwards I went in with my scissors and just kind of cut them perfectly around the tabs. I also added that same yellow paper onto the tabs on the other side, so it looks more interesting and cohesive as well. And I'm going to be doing this in a little bit different of an order because usually I paint first in my weeklies, but I thought that I would do the other layout first. So I wrote June into the bottom of the spread, and then I added my monthly calendar where I made tons of mistakes again, and I really had to just count the days so many times before I realized what I did wrong. Then on the right edge, I also added that craft paper. I also noticed that I think I added that header a little bit too close to the edge of the page. I did not realize that I was going to add the paper, so it's a little bit cramped there, but it's okay. Then I added a little note section onto the left side of the bottom right of this whole spread and made those lines with the same gray brush pen underneath the header. And on the right side of each and every one of my weeklies, I have a task list. So I will always stamp the word tasks, and then underneath I will add all of the days of the week. And then underneath those, I can add my day specific tasks and events for each week. And this makes so much sense for me because I love seeing my daily diary entries and also my tasks and events at the same glance. So I don't have to, flip through the pages to see my tasks. I tried to do that one time as well, but I just did not really use my weeklies then. It makes so much more sense to have all of those things in the same place so you don't have to, search for them. But I think different things work for different people, so you could be different for sure. I only added the task list in my first weekly in this video, but I will do the same with my other Dutch door spreads later when I feel like it, or maybe when I get closer to those weeks. I always try to be as practical as possible with my weeklies because I feel like if I make things too hard or I make them hard to access, I think those times I just don't use my journal. Having my tasks, my notes, my small calendar, my weekly numbers and diary things kind of all available in the same place, I think makes so much more sense to me, and I just like it a lot, and it just makes things much more easy and fun to use in my opinion. So I always try to go for the most practical way of making my weeklies so I enjoy using them the most. But as you can see, I'm now painting the illustration onto the left side. I really love this painting. I think, again, the composition and the layout and the, direction of the leaves and strawberries and them hanging again, kind of with that curved stem, looks so pretty, and I really loved this process. As you can see, I did not show most of the process when I was making the leaves again. It's just me repeating the same things, and I feel like watching me paint the strawberries is much more fun. So I hope you don't mind that. But yeah, I just painted this and it was already very late that day. I was surprised how long this whole theme took me. I'm not sure about like any amount of hours, I don't know, but I did this in the span of 2 days, and I think I definitely spent like 10 hours on it at least. But yeah, when I cut the footage and took all the random bits out, it was like 6 hours. So I guess we had a lot more hours. But yeah, I definitely had so much fun with this. It's so nice, so summery. I love how the yellow paper worked with this whole theme and made this even more summery. And I'm really excited for June because June is of course the time for midsummer, and that is always my favorite time of the year, and I'm really looking forward to spending midsummer with friends and just hanging out. And I'm happy that my bullet journal also kind of works perfectly with that. But as the last details, I added a red washi tape onto the edge of my last Dutch door flap thingy. This is going to be my June memories page, and I'm stamping the header here as well. I really love the red washi tape. It's from Mellow Days as well, so you can get 10% off with my same discount code that I mentioned in the beginning. It's in the description of this video if you want to check that out. I really loved adding that pop of color into the edge of the spread. I think it looks really pretty and just makes it look much more fun. But yeah, now we are getting to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed seeing me set out the pages in my June theme, and now I'm going to quickly flip through all of the pages that I made in this video. Again, I am completely fallen in love with this theme, and I'm really excited to use this for the next month. I hope you really liked it too, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Leave a like and leave a strawberry emoji down in the comments so I know you watched until the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!